Okay, in the first part we talked about what test anxiety is and how to deal with anxiety is what we're going to talk about now. As far as dealing with anxiety, I actually like dealing with in two parts. As far as the first part, remember we were talking about that anxiety has a physical component. Well, our body is made up in such a way that it's almost like we have switches that can be tripped whenever we do certain types of actions. These are like control systems in our body. One of those control systems is actually related to our heart and our breathing, which is something that we can control. One thing that we cannot ever do whenever we're extremely stressed out until we just pass out from exhaustion altogether is go to sleep. And we know this. Whenever you're really edgy, it's hard to go to sleep, and a lot of times people suffer from anxiety. Whenever they suffer from anxiety, they also suffer from insomnia. Well, one way of getting the heart and breathing system to get back down to a more relaxed state, the type of state that you might be in if you were asleep, is by doing deep breathing. Now, this breathing involves breathing in through your nose using abdominal breathing. Now, what I mean by that is you're going to actually pull air into your lungs using your abdominal muscles. Now, this will end up making your posture be very straight up and down. So you can breathe in through your nose to about a count of 3. Should take about 3 seconds to fill your lungs up completely until you can't hold any more air in. And as you pull in that breath, you'll notice that you just absolutely have to straighten up. You hold that breath out for about you hold the breath for about 3 seconds, and you tense as many muscles in your body as you can. Then you let that breath out, and you can exhale real quickly. And while you're exhaling, you're going to relax every muscle that you've tensed. Now, what this does, after you've done this a couple times, it makes your body think that you've actually done something to react to that stressor. That muscle tensing makes your body think that you've either fought or you've run away from that which is stressing you out. This isn't going to work necessarily just the first time that you are encountering a stressful situation. So you can't just do this breathing once and then you've automatically learned to relax. It's something that you have to build up a habit of. You've developed a habit of getting stressed out whenever you've encountered a test, so you need to develop a habit of now relaxing whenever you encounter a test. And one way I suggest to people to do this is to take something that just mildly annoys them. Say you burn your toast whenever you're making your breakfast. So as soon as you burn that toast, you skip over to this breathing. Breathing in, holding it, tensing up, and release. Doing it again. Release. Okay, well, that makes you feel a little bit better. Well, the next time you might try something that's just a little bit more stressful. Say that you've come to work just a few minutes late. So as soon as you get to work, don't do this whenever you're driving, of course. Let's say you get in the door and you sit down at your desk, take that deep breath in, and breathe out. Well, after a few weeks of working up to something that's a little bit more stressful, your body and mind will get the idea that, oh, whenever I encounter something that has giving me anxiety, that this is the type of reaction I have, rather than to get into a panic state. Another part of dealing with the physical is exercise. There's a lot of research that supports that a regular exercise regimen, first of all, brings down your overall stress level. Your stress level acts almost like a battery, and over time you can get that battery full of stress. And if you regularly exercise, that'll empty that out. But in addition, good exercise is also just a quick way to release some tension if you are anxious at the time. So say that you know that you're getting ready to go take a test, it might be a good idea just to go take a walk. Another part of dealing with anxiety is often overlooked, and that has to do with good nutrition. There's a lot of research that also supports that poor nutrition makes us handle stress poorly and builds up our anxiety. We're not able to cope with stressful situations nearly as well. So on the flip side, eating well will help us deal with stress. The other element, and this is one that students are very common of cheating on, has to do with sleep. A lot of people pull all-nighters right before a test, but that's actually a very poor idea. We know that lack of sleep really affects how well we handle stress. Things that may not bother us all that much normally end up really aggravating us quite a bit. In fact, there was a recent study done, I believe it's at Harvard, that found that the effects of sleep deprivation have exactly the same effects as alcohol intoxication. So we wouldn't go get intoxicated right before a test, so it's definitely not a good idea to become sleep deprived, to go without sleeping right before that test. Now, how to deal with those thoughts? Well, one way we can do that is a more positive mental behavior to help us stress out. And one way we can do that is with visualization. So we jokingly sometimes hear people call saying that they're going to their happy place whenever they are stressed out. Well, what they mean by that is finding some place or time that you feel most relaxed or most de-stressed, and closing your eyes and picturing in your mind what it would be like to be in that place. And not just picturing that, but also thinking about what does it sound like to be there, and what are the smells and what are the feelings that you have. The more that you involve your senses in this visualization, the more your mind will actually end up getting caught up in this, and it will automatically relax you over time. So if you close your eyes and imagine all those individual details, what kind of sounds, what are the smells? Say if you're walking through a forest, what does it smell like to walk through a forest? You do this, eventually your body and mind will start to calm down. As far as other habits of mind go, one of the biggest things that we do that really brings up our anxiety level is talk to ourselves with things like cannots and should nots. So we say, oh, I should be able to do this. I should do better than I have done before. I should be able to do well on this test. Or on the flip side, I cannot ever pass a test like this. I just can't do well in this kind of class. I can't do well in math. These are habits that end up increasing our stress, and we should rather replace this with things. Notice the irony in that. We should replace it with things like, I can pass this test. I am capable of doing well on tests. So we replace that negative self-talk with positive self-talk. Another thing that we do that stresses us out more is thinking about long-term consequences whenever it's taking a test. So we think, well, if I don't pass this test, I'm not going to be able to become a nurse. Or if I don't pass this test, I'll never find a job. Well, instead we should really be focusing on immediately what's in front of us, the next few test questions, rather than where it's going to get us in the long run. But one thing that we can do as far as long term is remind ourselves that we are going through this difficult time for a reason. We are taking this test so that we can do something better, and we will be capable of doing that. Well, what we need to do, though, in order to be able to get to that point is make sure that we do study well, because there's no making up for good study time. No matter how much you're relaxed or what kind of anxiety-reducing behaviors that you have, if you haven't prepared for the test, there's nothing that's going to get you a better grade. But once you have prepared, remind yourself that you have put in good time to study. Okay, so that only takes care of two parts, the mental and the physical. Well, there's a funny way that your mind and body work together, that if we take care of two of these elements, those feelings and those physical reactions that your body have will eventually get drawn along with those changes. And these together are habits that you need to develop over time, just like the stress and anxiety was developed over time. So give it some time to develop. Give yourself patience and be understanding that it will happen eventually. So how do we actually learn then? Well, to be able to study effectively, we need to learn things in a context. To be able to prepare for that test and to be able to adequately prepare so that we know the material, we have to center the information in a way that it will make good connections in our brain. So one way to make a good context is to preview material before we start studying or before we attend a lecture, so it gives our brain something to hold on to. And then after we've attended a lecture or looked over our notes, we actually do what's called framing that material. We put it in and purposely think about what context that fits into what we know. How does this connect to what we've learned in other classes or even on other days within this class? Later on in the week, we might want to take some time to review our lecture notes and to think back. What we can do is almost like playing a tape backwards and think, well, yesterday I studied this in my class. The day before that, I studied this. This thing connects to something that we studied last week. This ends up developing memory. Now, when we have memory, what that is, those are brain cell connections. Those brain cell connections aren't formed automatically. It takes time and some repetition for those brain cell connections to be made. So what we have to do is spread out that learning over time. So it doesn't mean that if we look at the material the day before the test that we're going to automatically be able to get it. If we really want to learn it, we do have to spread it out. In fact, they say that the best time to look back at material in order to be able to study it is just about the time that you're just getting ready to forget it. So what does that mean? It means that you cannot procrastinate. You have to get things done early, and you have to plan ahead. So how can we feel better whenever we're studying then? One way we can do this is by finding a way to reward yourself whenever you have put in effort. One way that I actually reward myself is to take a trip to Baskin Robbins after I've studied hard for a class. Another thing that we need to do to feel better, though, is give ourselves credit. Very often we don't give ourselves enough credit for any kind of progress. So if we get a 40 on our last test and we ended up getting a 60, well, we didn't get exactly what we would hope for, but we definitely improved our score by 20%, and we do need to give ourselves credit for moving forward. And the other thing we need to do is always remind ourselves where it fits in the grand scale of things. This particular test 5 years down the road will not make very much difference. 10 years down the road, you probably won't remember very much of the information at all. So in the bigger picture of things, this test may not mean as much as we feel like it does at the time.